So welcome everybody to our local champion session for today, Earth Day, April 22nd, 2021. And we're really happy to be bringing to you this discussion about grants. And grants are something that will often come up with this climate work when you're working with municipalities. Because our local municipalities tend to be kind of strapped for cash. And, doing this work, there is state support for it and other support from other areas. So it's definitely something that you'll need to know about. Whether or not you actually choose to pursue grants is up to you. You don't have to, of course, but we want to make sure that you have some information to get started. So the structure of today, the format for today is first a presentation, and then we'll introduce our two other guests. And then if the group is into it, I think last time we tried doing the breakout rooms and that seemed to work really well to facilitate some breakout discussions. So maybe we'll do that as well, breaking into 3 groups with 2 of our cohort members each and rotating through. And then today what we're going to try to do is break a little bit early just so we can say goodbye to our special guests and as a cohort come together and just make sure we have a few minutes to answer any questions and check in about how you all are doing with all the work that you're up to. So with that, I would like to start off introducing Jill Henck. So Jill is someone that we know that actually Paige in her Austerlitz work knows Jill because Jill works for the Capital District Regional Planning Commission as a sustainability planner. And her role is really to work with communities in that capital region. So that entails some of our Columbia County folks here. In particular, one of the things she does is a resource for the Clean Energy Communities program, which, as we know, has some overlap with climate smart communities. And prior to joining the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, she worked as a planning technician for a county in Colorado. So she has some other experience besides the Hudson Valley. So we're very happy to have Jill here today giving us an overview of grants in this climate work area. So I'll mute myself and Jill, you can take it away.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah, it's actually just a note, my previous work in Colorado, I worked on marijuana licensing, which is becoming extremely relevant now. And I feel like I'm a fortune teller. I'm like, I know it's going to happen, guys. But yes, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the opportunity to come talk. Paige is wonderful. I am, as Vanessa mentioned, an outreach coordinator for the Capital Region, which includes Columbia and Greene County, all the way up to Washington and Warren County. I have a counterpart in the Mid-Hudson region, Carla Castillo, who many of you are probably very familiar with. You're nodding, I see that, yep. So yeah, we work on the Clean Energy Communities program. Part of that NYSERDA program is offering technical assistance through their sustainability outreach coordinators. So I work with municipalities, which is how I met Paige, because I work with the town of Austerlitz on the Clean Energy Communities program, but also Climate Smart Communities program. So because it's encapsulated within Clean Energy Communities, I also have an expertise within the Climate Smart program. But as you know, Climate Smart is super robust and has over 100 actions. And I, am always impressed by people who are experts in all of those actions. Really, I'm just an expert at reading the documentation in the portal and helping to explain it to people, which I'm sure all of you can understand at this point. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Clean Energy Communities program and the grants offered through that program, but I'm also going to touch upon the Clean Energy Communities adjacent grants that I see municipalities applying for in order to support the CEC program, but also some of the CSC work. So just to get started, show of hands, how many of your communities are participating in the Clean Energy Communities program at the moment? Okay, so most of you. And Dan, are you from Copake? Is that correct?
Yes, Copake.
Okay. So Copake and I talked to Christina, who I know is Germantown, are both in Columbia County. So after this call, if, and Christina, I know we've been in touch, if you want more help on the Clean Energy Communities program, you can absolutely reach out to me on that. But just to get an idea, most of you are familiar with the Clean Energy Communities program. So I'm going to move through the beginning of my presentation pretty quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay. So you're all seeing my Become a Clean Energy Community slide?
Yep.
I have two screens and sometimes I get confused about what's going on. Okay, here we go. I can see you all again. Okay, so the Clean Energy Communities program is a NYSERDA program, whereas the Climate Smart Communities program is an interagency program that is administered by the DEC. The NYSERDA has a hand in that program, which is why I'm able to offer technical assistance, but as you all know, it's administered by the DEC. So this is our team at CDRPC. This is my colleague, Tara Donadio, and probably about 2 weeks, if you have any more questions about what I'm presenting on, you're going to talk to Tara, probably not me. We also have an intern who's wonderful and has been doing a lot of like data work for some municipalities. And I'll talk a little bit about the internship funding program that we were able to secure in order to get her services. And basically the Clean Energy Communities program is, this is the leadership round. So some of you are probably familiar with the first iteration. You complete a certain amount of actions and you're eligible for grant funds for clean energy projects. So the leadership round is a little bit more difficult, and the intent is to encourage municipalities to continue pursuing energy efficiency and clean energy actions. And the biggest change within the program is the grant structure. So previously, if you completed 4 out of 10 high impact actions, you are eligible for a designation grant. If you're not designated already and you complete 4 out of 10, there's actually 13 actions now, you're still eligible for this designation grant, but it's $5,000. Excuse me. There are also 2 other types of grants, one being action grants, and those are applicable for 2 particular high impact actions that I'll talk about in a minute. And then there are also points-based grants. So this is where the program is a little bit more similar to Climate Smart, maybe because NYSERDA wanted to make our lives a little bit more difficult and just make it even more confusing. But as you complete high impact actions, you accumulate points, and once you reach a points threshold, you're eligible for grant funds. So these are the high impact actions. Just going to jump right into those. The majority of these were already existing. The program has been expanded so that certain high impact actions, for example, benchmarking, which in the previous program, all you had to do was pass a resolution that said, we're going to keep track of municipal building energy use. By passing that resolution, you got credit for completing 1 high impact action. This has been expanded so that NYSERDA wants to see that you're actually doing what you said you were going to do in the resolution. So just a little bit more reporting to NYSERDA. Energy code training was the same. That's a 1-day training offered to code officials in your municipality. One of the new ones is a clean heating and cooling demo. So you could get credit for this. And again, we've got all the points allocations here. As you complete these, you accumulate points. And then once you reach the points threshold, you're eligible for grants. So I'm not going to talk too much about these high impact actions because I think a lot of you already know a lot about them. And there's a resource at the end that I will share if you want all of the details on them. But I did want to highlight the 2 action grants, and those are the New York Stretch Energy Code and community campaigns. So the stretch code, and let's see, I think I have a slide on this. The stretch code is a more efficient conservation energy code implemented by New York State. It's about 2 years at this point in advance of the existing code. And in a small municipality, which I believe you are all technically small to medium municipalities under 40,000, you're eligible for a $5,000 grant for adopting the stretch code. So I'm just gonna, oh, this is an important slide. So the other action grant available is community campaigns. So that's if you conduct a campaign promoting community solar or electric vehicles or demand response or heating and cooling to your residents. So by completing those separate actions, you get standalone grants. You don't necessarily have to be a designated clean energy community. Just by completing those actions, you're eligible for a match-free $5,000 grant. So the points-based grants, as you accumulate points, you're eligible for 3 different tiers of grants. So this is an important point to mention that, say you get to the 3,000 point level, you open up a $10,000 grant. As you accumulate more points, you're eligible for another grant, and then more points, so up to 5,000 points, you're eligible for a 3rd grant. Sorry if you hear my screaming toddler in the background. He's at the bottom of the stairs. I hear him just like rattling the gate, but we're gonna pretend you can't hear him. So this is how many grants are available statewide. For the small to medium communities, the points-based grants are actually region-wide. So that's fortunate for all of your communities. So for 3,000 points, small to medium municipalities are eligible for a $10,000 grant, and there's 40 of those. 4,000 points, there are $20,000 grants, there's 10 of those, and 5,000 points, there's $70,000 grants, and there are 4 of those. But I'm going to talk about what those grants can be spent on in just a second. So again, the stretch code, you're eligible for 12,000 points, and you're eligible for a 5,000 or 50,000 if you are a large municipality. And this needs to be adopted and enabled by the end of the year. This is the only action within the program where that is applicable. And then the community campaigns, and again, I can answer questions about these community campaigns. I know I'm running through this very quickly. You don't have to be designated. You do get points for completing each campaign, and you're eligible for a $5,000 grant for completing each one. And to complete one, for example, community solar, you just need 10 residents to sign up for community solar, and you're eligible for a $5,000 grant. And this is just a list of how many of those. And the action grants are available statewide. So these are a bit more competitive because they're available at a statewide basis. But there are 100 available for both New York Stretch and the action grants. And I think there are 4 of the New York Stretch grants claimed already, and none of the community grants, community campaign grants have been claimed, but I know that there have been a lot of municipalities that have submitted what's called a scoping document to get that process started. So I anticipate it's going to be a windfall once those get completed. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back one slide and talk a little bit about the type of projects that can be, these grants can be used for. So within the Clean Energy Communities program, the $5,000 grants can be pretty non-specific. The grant application process for that is much simpler than the larger grants. There's what's called a grants workbook, which is essentially just a spreadsheet. The spreadsheet needs to be completed with the contact information for the municipality and generally what you think the money can go towards. And it has to be energy efficiency related, but there's no real metrics that are required. You just have to, say, for example, you want to change out some lighting in your town hall. You just have to say, we spent this on LED bulbs in our town hall. As the grants get larger, there are prescriptive projects that you can apply for. So within this grants workbook, you can apply for an HVAC upgrade. You can apply for an audit in order to determine what sort of HVAC upgrades are required. You can do electric vehicles, electric vehicle charging stations. You can apply for solar on your town hall. There's also what I'll call a wild card category. So there's actually a town in Columbia County, town of Ankrum, who part of the first iteration of the program did an LED bulb exchange. So NYSERDA will also let you apply for a program that's kind of community centered. So the town bought, I want to say $7,000 worth of LED bulbs for like internal residential use, and they gave them away to their residents. Basically anything that is energy efficiency or renewable energy related, these grants can be spent on. So I guess I can pause there and take any questions on the CEC program before I move on, if there are any. Okay.
Oh, Kristen, you have a question?
Sure.
Yeah, I was looking into the energy code training,
Mhm.
and it said that it had to basically take place this year or after, and it wasn't available until maybe the fourth quarter of this year at the earliest.
That is correct. So the energy code training, even if it was taken in the past, needs to be retaken, and those aren't going to be scheduled until Q4 2021. So in our region, we're starting to plan those for October. I'm sure the Mid-Hudson is as well. I will make a note that because of COVID, and maybe this will change, hopefully it will change, but the consulting company, the training company that we work with is putting a cap of 15 people per training, and they're offering 2 per region. So I think that they're going to fill up very quickly. But I will also note that you don't necessarily have to attend a training in your region. So if the Mid-Hudson's fills up, you can come to one of the capital region if it's not far. But I'm sure that once those are available, Carlo will send out an email blast letting you know when and where they are.
Is there a cost to enroll?
No, they're free.
Okay.
They're free, and they offer Department of State credits for your code enforcement officer. And they used to provide snacks, but I think those days are over.
I have a question about the grants. Is it okay if you say, well, we're eligible for this $5,000 grant, and we're just going to use it towards, say, a $25,000 project?
Yes, as long as it's energy related. Again, those $5,000 grants, they're being very flexible with them. So yes, you can use it as a portion of a project.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing any municipalities start to install the higher speed EV chargers, the level 3?
The DC fast chargers?
Yeah.
I haven't. I've talked to some municipalities about it, specifically the town of Colony. That's obviously a very large town within the capital region. The issue with that is that there are funding opportunities, and I'm going to talk about in a second, for level 2 charging stations, but there aren't a ton available at the moment for fast chargers. One of those that I'm anticipating will be available is the ZEV infrastructure rebate through the DEC. That'll cover up to 80%, but the cost for fast chargers is significantly more expensive than the cost for level 2. Plus you have to usually pay to upgrade your electrical service, and just the draw from the grid to charge those vehicles is more expensive for the municipality. There is a program through NYSERDA at the moment for DC fast chargers, and you've probably heard a little bit about it. I think the governor's been including it in his announcements, but those are they're not geared towards municipalities. They're more geared towards installers who are getting these contracts to install multiple DC fast chargers across the state.
Okay.
Okay. So, oops, where'd you go? Where'd you go? So, of those high impact actions, a handful of them are free to do, like the code enforcement training, but some of them do require upfront investment by the municipality. And also, just one last one last note on the Clean Energy Communities grant application process. One, Tara and I are here to help municipalities with those grant applications. So, you know, I'm going to talk a lot about finding your point of contact for each particular grant. For the Clean Energy Communities program, we are your point of contact. We can also help you with figuring out the metrics for those projects and how to submit. So for Clean Energy Communities, as I mentioned, you are going to complete that workbook, which is just an Excel spreadsheet, and then submit it to a Salesforce portal. So there's a handful of different portals that you will likely interface with when applying for these grants. One is Salesforce, one is Grants Gateway, one is the CFA portal, and then there's a handful that are just like online forms that are really Salesforce portals, but to you it just looks like a form online. So for Clean Energy Communities, it's going to be Salesforce, which in my experience is fairly easy to work with. The only difficulty with that is that NYSERDA doesn't allow the coordinators back-end access to that program. But the way that I've been able to deal with that is that I'll screen share with a person who's uploading something into Salesforce and tell them how to do it. So just a note on that. I guess stop clicking, sorry. So I mentioned the internship program. So NYSERDA has, or I suppose New York State has an internship program that we utilize at CDRPC to hire 2 interns, one for the Clean Energy Communities program, and we also run the Heat Smart Capital Region campaign. So those programs, the interns need to be able to say that they're working on something energy related or climate change related, but the qualifications for those are pretty broad. Excuse me, that program will cover up to 90% of the cost of an intern. Municipalities are eligible to apply. And I believe the maximum hours you can use them for 960 hours, which is like half time for a year. And I believe they account for a wage of like up to $16 an hour. So the process for applying for that program is extremely easy. The one caveat that you should be aware of is that you need to become an eligible business first in order to apply, which is a fairly straightforward process. I sent this presentation to Paige and Vanessa. They can share it with you, but I put live links in here for all the things I'm going to mention. To become an eligible business, you have to have like at least 2 employees. You have to, let's see how many times I'll do that over the course of this presentation. Let's see. I'll just click on it and show you. So anyway, the process is fairly simple. It's just worth taking note that there are a few hoops you need to jump through in order to apply for a lot of these programs. And NYSERDA does a fairly good job of explaining how to do that. You just need to know where to go. So are you seeing the website? Are you still seeing my presentation? See the website? Okay, so you just go to apply today. And again, this is one of those that's just a form. So you'll fill out the form, and then when you actually go to apply for the intern, all you do is send that to the email address listed within the program. So that's a pretty straightforward one. Any questions on the internship program?
I have, can I ask one?
Yeah.
Can a municipality be an eligible business?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's an amazing tip, Jill. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Tara was just out on maternity leave, and we hired our 2 interns right when she left, and I am so grateful for them. There's a list of NYSERDA like students, and it's open to students and people that have been students within 12 months. So there's like a list of NYSERDA approved candidates if you want to go through those. Personally, I thought it was more helpful to kind of localize our pool of applicants, but just know that that's available as a resource as well. Okay, next is the Charge Ready grant. So as far as charging station infrastructure, there are two opportunities that I work with the most, and that is the Charge Ready grant, which is through NYSERDA, and the Joint Utilities EV Make Ready opportunity. And these two can be stacked. Charge Ready will cover up to $8,000 for a dual port level 2 charging station. There are a few caveats that the location requirements have to meet, like there has to be at least 10 parking spots, has to be open to the public. There is a list of required equipment that's used, but it's a really long list. I'm sure that you could find something that's appropriate. And in order to apply, again, another one of those caveats, you first have to be an approved contractor. So that's confusing in itself. Like, you're not a contractor, you're a municipality, but in terms of NYSERDA, you have to be an approved contractor. So again, this is one of those fillable forms. You just click, become an approved contractor. And this application is also through the Salesforce portal. The Joint Utilities EV Make Ready program is available for all of the utilities in New York State. So regardless of who serves you, this is for EV charging station infrastructure. So National Grid, NYSEG, they will pay, I believe, up to 90% of the infrastructure costs for installing charging stations. The other charging station opportunity, and I'm going to jump into this a little bit down here, is the ZEV rebate. So the ZEV rebate is not available at the moment. It has historically been offered every year. Because of COVID, it wasn't last year. That is through the DEC. I anticipate that that will be available again. A lot of you probably know Dazzle. Dazzle told me that they are anticipating it will open. It's in their budget that it will open again this year in May. So the ZEV rebate historically has covered 80% of the cost of charging station infrastructure, and that is both level 2 charging as well as DC fast chargers. So if you're looking for funding for a fast charger, that is going to be your best bet. I will say it now. It is a great opportunity, especially if you're looking to spend $30,000 on a fast charger. The ZEV rebate is through the Grants Gateway portal. And if you're not familiar with the portal, and even if you are familiar with the portal, is a nightmare. Yeah, see some knots. Yeah, you know. The reporting process for that grant is also fairly cumbersome, but I will make a nod to Myra over at the DEC. I can't tell if she likes me or she really dislikes me at this point. But it's just another great example of finding a human to talk to. And if you have any questions about these opportunities, reach out to that person and ask them, because they will tell you the answer. If you send in a report that has errors in it, they will tell you how to fix it. So while it can be cumbersome, there is, I suppose, a silver lining to it. So go ahead.
What's the match for that one?
20%.
20%.
And again, that's what it was historically. I don't know if that's exactly what it's going to look like when they make it available again.
Okay.
I will also make a note now that really when it comes to the DEC grants, both the Climate Smart grants, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and the ZEV grants, Dazzle is really your expert that you want to talk to about these. And I am sure that she's going to host a handful of webinars about how to apply for these grants and the opportunities available once they are available. And a couple other, in case you haven't, I'm just going to click through this one. NYSERDA's website is pretty easy to navigate when it comes to grant opportunities. So I'm just talking about one slide's worth of grant opportunities. There are a lot of them available. So this is a link just to the current funding opportunities. A perfect example. So there's the Charge Ready, Clean Energy Community. So there's your point of contact. If you need somebody to bother, here they are. The other thing is, you're going to click through to these opportunities, and there's a handful of resources. There's a summary of revisions, implementation manual. So while they do seem overwhelming, all of the answers are there. They're just sometimes buried within this documentation. Okay, going back to my PowerPoint, Grants Gateway, couple helpful tips. In order to use the Grants Gateway, you have to mail in a form. So you can't do it online. You have to print it out. You have to mail it in, and then they will approve you so that you can create an account.
Oh my God. So wait, how far in advance should you do that, in advance of the deadline, the grant application deadline?
So that's one of my helpful tips on the next slide, is do that as soon as you possibly can. There's a chance that your municipality already has a Grants Gateway account. So you're going to want to contact your clerk or whoever's in charge of that and see if there is already an account. You can be added as a user, but then another complicated piece of it is that there's different user permissions. So you could potentially fill out the application, but then when you go to sign it, you're not the signatory. So then you can't sign it. So ahead of time, long before the day before the grant application is due, you're going to want to make sure that you have sent in that piece of paper. You have the correct permission to apply for the grant. And if your leadership doesn't want you to be the one to sign it, know who the person is that can sign it. And just have all of that information lined up, because that can be very stressful when you're approaching a deadline. So Grants Gateway also has a grant search engine, which is, I think, a little more difficult to use than the NYSERDA one, but this has all of the agencies across the state and their grant opportunities. So again, there's a lot of opportunities, and I don't know if Paige already mentioned it, but Iris and our intern Haley were working on putting together a spreadsheet of grant opportunities, but this is also a live update of the opportunities that are available. So for example, there are some DEC opportunities available at the moment. Just to click through this. So this is through the estuary program. Basic information. If you have questions about the grant opportunities, you can upload them here. I personally, so I think it just already downloaded that. So this will view grant opportunity. You're going to download the program. I personally like to find, I don't like just submitting questions to a bot. I like finding a person. I don't know if you all know Ingrid, but Ingrid works for the Hudson River Estuary Program, and she's likely your point of contact. But another tip is really study these documents before you put your application together, because within these documents, they're going to tell you exactly the criteria that you need to submit to get approved. So a tricky one, actually, that I was looking through this grant application notice. So they'll tell you how to do the Grants Gateway. One of the requirements, actually, for this grant, and I've seen this for Ag and Markets grant as well, is that they want you to reach out to staff and set up a meeting ahead of time and make that point of contact to become eligible to get the grant. So really read the fine print at the bottom of these grants. They'll have, let me get to it. They do have criteria for approval, and just structure your application around that criteria. Let's see, pass fail criteria, application evaluation scoring criteria. So, I mean, it's kind of like a test you took in high school. They're giving you exactly what you need to do, and just follow this item for item as closely as you can, and hopefully you'll be approved for the grant. as difficult as these are, a lot of the New York State grants are extremely competitive. So I encourage you to really take a note of the information in these. So I know I'm cutting close on time. So those DEC grants, the same exact thing. And I think that the DEC grants are a little bit more structured in that they have detailed criteria for approval. Like all the climate smart grants in the past have had those. I'm anticipating that the 2021 RFA will also have those, but take a look at that and structure it accordingly. Another note on the climate smart grants. This is another confusing thing. Within that RFA, it will tell you need to register your community in Grants Gateway, which you do need to do. However, the application that you need to submit is through the CFA portal. So CFA is Consolidated Funding Application. So once a year, typically in May, New York State opens up this one joint grant application portal called CFA. That is where you'll need to submit your grant. So Grants Gateway and CFA, which is confusing, but also a blessing because at least you're not using Grants Gateway for the entire thing. And the last grant opportunity I wanted to mention, and this is actually news to me, and I have a meeting with a couple of individuals next week, but NYSERDA also has what's called the FlexTech program. And my understanding of FlexTech in the past is that they will provide funding for audits or studies for clean heating and cooling. Part of that is that you have to actually move forward with the project proposed in the study in order to be eligible for a certain amount of the grant funding. But they will also cover the cost of, or up to 50% of the cost of a greenhouse gas inventory and a climate action plan. So potentially, if, and I'm assuming they will be, the DEC still includes the greenhouse gas inventory and the climate action plan certification grant opportunities, you can stack those and potentially receive up to 100% funding for those actions. So there's a link to that. There's FlexTech consultants. There's like a finder. You can find a consultant within your county, and they can help you through that process. So just a few other tips. If you're not already, DEC sends out a lot of emails about grant opportunities. I would get on that list. NYSERDA does the same thing. Just to reiterate, finding those points of contact for the grant opportunities. I'm just going to use the PDF next time. Like I said, some grants even require that. Register and get to know the platform early. This will save you a lot of stress. Look at the review criteria, and just a heads up, and this is very specific to the Clean Energy Communities program, most grants will not cover work that has been done in the past. Clean Energy Communities, NYSERDA typically uses a go, no-go structure. So if you have a project in mind, just make sure that you get the approval before you actually spend the money to do it. And my last slide is just contact information. My contact information, Tara's contact information. I've included Carla's email if you don't already have it. Here's a link to a webinar we put on the Clean Energy Communities program. Here's a link to the guidance document for Clean Energy Communities. And then just a link to the Clean Energy Communities website. So I'll stop there and take any questions unless you want to go into the breakout groups.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. Incredible. And yeah, we'll definitely be sharing the slides on our private site. I think maybe what might be nice actually is if we do introduce Amanda and Ellen and hear a little bit about their stories, and then we could do some Q&A as a group, and then and then break out into smaller groups if folks are into that. Does that sound good? All right, great. So we're really happy to have Ellen Calves here with us today. She is someone who's worked in sustainability for a long time in the town of Bedford, where she's one of the first to pass the New York Stretch Code, which Jill mentioned. Way to go. And she is, she's also the on the town board, as well as being their Climate Smart Community Task Force Coordinator in Bedford. The town is also subscribed to community solar, so they're 100% green energy supply. And they have passed a new climate action plan, and even ensured that heat pumps are replacing the boiler in the town hall during renovation. So lots of nitty grit experience here. The reason I reached out to Ellen is because I was kind of pouring through who had received grants around our area. And so she stuck out to me because they got a grant for a food waste collection pilot through Climate Smart Communities. And so I thought she'd be great to have here to tell us a little bit about her background, lessons learned, words of wisdom. So Ellen, maybe if you could just share a little bit of your story with the group before
Thank you. So
Yeah.
nice to be invited to be here. My secret weapon was that I was part of a really robust organization in our town called Bedford 2030 that has really driven our town to do all of the things that were just listed. It's a mighty small organization that started 10 years ago and drove the Climate Action Plan writing and eventually raised money and hired staff so that there's like a paid staff person to keep pushing environmental outreach in our town, which is incredible. And after working in that organization for about 6 years, well, 5 years, I ran for town board. So I have left that organization to be on the town board, but still really engaged in working on those things. We do need to find another Climate Smart Communities task force leader, I think, if we're gonna keep pushing on that, because I can't do everything. But we became a Climate Smart community. I mean, I guess we took the pledge a long time ago when Bedford 2020 is now called Bedford 2030 because we've set new goals. But Bedford 2020 first got formed, went to the town, wrote a climate action plan, and then almost immediately took the pledge to become a Climate Smart community a long time ago. But when we had done a program in our town, Zero Waste Challenge, where we got a lot of people to track how much recycling, trash, and food waste that they had. We actually gave them little scales, like fish scales, that you hang your waste from to see how much it weighed. And a bunch of families and households did this for, I think it was 8 weeks, every week, measuring and weighing their trash, so we had some great statistics about how food waste was 25% of everybody's full waste amount. And we really wanted to increase food scrap recycling. And we had done a lot of outreach about at-home composting, and we have a drop-off program at our recycling center, but we were thinking, how can we get to the point where we have curbside pickup throughout our town? We should do some kind of pilot, and we should get money to fund it so that we can do curbside composting throughout our town. The problem was there was some money available through the Climate Smart Communities, but we had never done any of the, all the work that it takes to get the silver designation, but we figured we probably had done enough. We just hadn't put it in the portal. So we hired an intern and she diligently collected up all the stuff that you need to upload to the portal and show that you had done community campaigns around things and put solar panels on the roof of the water filtration plant and the charging stations that the town had gotten. So after she kind of went around and found all the things that we had, we got to bronze status. I think all we needed was bronze to apply for the grant. We fell short on a bunch of things that we probably still could get more points for Climate Smart Communities. But I kind of am like, if there's no grant that we're looking for, it's a lot of work to keep getting your points and upping your status. So we should probably hire an intern this summer and get to silver if we think we have the points to do it. But especially with the stretch code. We probably, we haven't put that in there, things like that. Anyway, so we got bronze, and at the same time we were working vigorously to write this grant and figure out how we could get this program going. So what we wanted to do was to figure out, we didn't want to fully pay for residents to do it because we wanted people to have their food scraps picked up at their end of their driveway for 1 year, but we wanted to convince them that this was a good thing to do and to stay in the program. So we thought a little bit of skin in the game would help. So we decided we would write a grant that we wanted to get money to pay half of their cost to have curbside pickup. And we have a volunteer in our community who is like a solid waste expert. He's retired solid waste expert. He's an engineer and he's brilliant. So we also have that as our secret weapon. And so he really helped do a lot of the calculations that we needed to show that this program would reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That was probably the hardest thing to prove, or to at least say that we're going to be able to prove, because there's a truck driving around picking up food waste, and food waste isn't, that big of an emitter. So he had a lot of calculations in our existing greenhouse gas emissions inventory, and some of the route optimization that the hauler is doing, to figure out, we have to stay on top of that statistic as we do this. Some of the other things, we did have a hauler already in our area, which really, we couldn't have done this if that weren't the case. So there's already somebody privately picking up food scraps and taking them to a nearby farm. So that was helpful. And we kind of knew what his price was going to be if we had to bid it out, but we knew there weren't a lot of other companies to meet the bid. So we knew what he was going to charge, and he gave us a good rate because we were getting him new customers. So we wrote the grant to say, this is how much it's going to cost per household. We want enough money so that every household can only pay half. So we want to be able to give our residents 50% of whatever it costs to do this. I think it's $27 a month to get food waste picked up curbside. So we wanted our residents to pay half of it. So we really, that was our big amount that we wanted. And the grant that we wrote required that we pay half. And so what we did was say that we were basically paying for half in volunteer hours and town staff time. So that was another complicated thing to figure out. Like, volunteer hours count for like $12 an hour. And then the staff time, we had to get all the information about like what's their salary and their benefits and how much do they make per hour. And then figure out how much time everybody was going to spend on this program. It's a 3-year pilot. So each year, 75 families can do the pilot and get half the money for the program. And then after the first year, we're hoping that those 75 will stay in the program, but they won't get the subsidy anymore. They'll still get a good rate from the hauler. And then we'll bring in the 75 new, and then the third year, another 75, and hope that we can track how much food waste we collected, and the hauler reports that to us, the greenhouse gas emissions reduced. And at the same, simultaneously, we have partnered with the organization Bedford 2030, who's helping us do tons of outreach to the entire community about food scrap recycling in general. So once we did get this grant approved and did the work plan and all the stuff we had to do, and then COVID hit, and this was supposed to start last year. It took like over a year I think it took like a year to get the signed contract so that we could start. So we really have the grant was supposed to start last March. It pretty much started this March, and we have a big press release going out next week. And we have a whole bunch of people who are in the program coming to our recycling center. They're bringing their bins that they're going to put their food waste in. The hauler's coming with his truck, and we're going to take a big group photo to sort of let the whole community know this is happening and start to really promote food scrap recycling. You can do it at home. You can drop it off at the recycling center. You can become part of this pilot, and you can follow these people's stories throughout the year. So that's where we are. We got $37,422 to spend over the next 3 years, and all of the money from the state is really just going to people in the program, and everything else is just going to be towards our volunteer time to execute it. So is that helpful?
Thank you so much. It's just really good for us to hear what other towns are doing and how you're doing it. So really appreciate that. And then next I'd like to introduce Amanda Gotto, who's with us from New Paltz. Amanda, after spending 2 decades working in the pharmaceutical industry, she decided to step away from the private sector and put her skills to work in her local community. So she's got an interest in the environment and wanted to help out. So New Paltz had taken the Climate Smart Community Pledge and really needed some help to get that up and running. And so Amanda brought her experience and really put that into focus with grant writing and assisting with managing the grants. So, you know, her other half of the dynamic duo, Janelle, couldn't be with us here today, who is the actual coordinator of their task force in New Paltz. But Amanda is an excellent person to have here because of her firsthand experience with grants. So, you know, she does have experience with that CFA portal and probably the dreaded gateway. And, you know, knows about things like writing the reports that are often required with grants or managing the RFP process that flows after you are approved for funding. And has also helped out with the actual submittal for the bronze filing for New Paltz. So Amanda, yeah, tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. Well, we have a similar story in that our communities, and first of all, I guess New Paltz, it's a little bit unusual in that we are a town and a village. The village is wholly contained within the town, but they're 2 separate municipalities. So we actually serve 2, Janelle and I, and our task force serve both the town and the village, and everything we do has to be done for the town and for the village. So when we went for certification, we had to fill out all of the certification application for one and then for the other. And they each got separately certified, not for always exactly the same activities. So interesting, but so whenever we get a grant, we apply for it for both, but we have to make sure that we either do parallel tracks, or if we have, like for instance, in our NRI, we have sections that are unique to the village that pull out the village's separate part and then the town around the village. So it's a little bit crazy that way. But both the town and the village had taken the pledge back, I think, in 2011 and got a clean energy certification for their high impact activities. And then everything just kind of went quiet. And in 2016, they hired a grant writer to apply for DEC Climate Smart Community Certification Grant. I think it was early in the program and the money was probably, it was pretty fresh. And so they actually got awarded a grant for, I think it was $38,000 that they then couldn't launch, because just getting the grant is not the story. You have to also have a state master contract. So once the grant's awarded, they then give you all the information, and the next, say it's awarded in December, in January and February, you are supposed to be putting together the state master contract and submitting that for approval. And that requires a work plan and a budget and deliverables, measurable deliverables. A lot of things that this grant writer was apparently totally unprepared to do and just had no idea. So this grant was, in 2018, finally, the town and village appointed a coordinator, Janelle, and a task force came together and I got involved in it. And we realized we had inherited a grant that the clock was ticking. It was for 5 years and nothing had been done for, 2017, 2018. And why not? And it was because we could not get this off the ground. So we started talking to Dazzle and trying to understand what was needed. Backtracking a grant you didn't create and you do not know how they came up with what Why did they come up with that amount? Why did they come up with those amounts of matching? Who was doing what? None of that was there. So we had to essentially just recreate the whole thing and get it in. So a year later, we got the state master contract approved, but this grant was to get certified. So the guy went, I don't want to say, the grant writer went down the list of all the things that would get you points and threw them all in there. It was like, the kitchen sink was in there. And we were trying to figure out with $38,000, how are we going to do all of this? And we realized we couldn't. So Dazzle agreed that we could take the NRI out and make it separate. But we had to do 2 local government operations greenhouse gas inventories, one for the town, one for the village. And then that meant 2 reductions, goals for reduction, and climate action plans. We had to do a community greenhouse gas inventory, and that one had to have goals and a climate action plan. We had a vulnerability assessment, and then we had a climate strategies. We did the climate smart resiliency planning tool. We did a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of it was done volunteer. We only paid for the community greenhouse gas inventory. We paid an intern to do that, which didn't actually work out quite great, but and then we paid ICLEI to do our vulnerability assessment, and that was wonderful. They were incredibly helpful, and out of that we came out with a climate strategy plan based on the vulnerability assessment, and that's been that's led to a lot of other things. And that interaction with ICLEI, do you guys all know ICLEI? Been talking to them?
Yeah, well, actually, integrated into this local champions project, everybody here in our cohort will get their first year subscription to ICLEI complimentary as part of this. And we're figuring, TBD, up to the individuals here in the cohort when they want to activate that.
Okay, that's a wonderful thing, because ICLEI is very helpful. They're very responsive. They're very, I would say they're very cost conscious. I mean, so when you ask them for help, if you want to hire them to do things, they'll give you very reasonable proposals and break it down into parts, and you can, work with them on that. So, but that's the other thing we learned kind of the hard way, is you cannot write a grant if you don't know how much money you need to do what. So if you put out an RFP early and, explain to the timing of it, but you get some quotes back so that you have an idea of how much money you need for the grant. You don't want to write it for not enough and then not be able to cover it. The other thing we found is that we got letters of support from not only our elected boards, our town official boards, we got them from our planning boards, we got them from our environmental policy boards, we got them from, we have a Clean Water Open Space Commission, everyone we could think of to write and to propose how many hours of volunteer work they would provide. And if you come in, if you have a 50% match and you come in with above, that counts for a lot. If you actually have that much commitment from the community and from the staff. So don't just shoot for the minimum of the match. If you can do more, that seems to count a lot when they're evaluating your application. But you absolutely have to follow what Jill said. Follow those steps. They actually tell you how many points you can get by how much of each criteria you meet. You absolutely do that, because, and they'll even tell you if you don't have this in, your application gets kicked out immediately. So, it's really important to read those things for the DEC grants, the Climate Smart grants. And yes, the CFA portal is a nightmare. Our town was already registered, so that was a plus. The administrator was the assistant to the town supervisor, which was great, but it meant I had to sit with her. I would create all the content and then sit with her as she put it in. And again, if you're not familiar with working with it, you don't realize how balky it can be and how you have to save every step. And yeah.
Wasn't there some story, Amanda, where it was the day of the deadline and you assumed the deadline would be 5 p.m., but it actually closed at 3 p.m.?
Yes, pay attention to the deadline, not only the date, but the time. It was 3 p.m. We were back and unfortunately we waited till the last day because again, I had to work with someone else's schedule. You know, I couldn't just do, and so we started in July and it was July 11th and you had to, and so we wanted to go back and check one thing like, wait, did we get that right? And the whole thing froze up and they didn't care. They absolutely didn't care. We called, we cried, you know, it didn't matter. So I resubmitted it the next year, but I started in June, sitting down with her, working with her schedule. We got it in early and we got approved. But yeah, don't don't mistake those. What it writes down is what it says. It means it. So yeah.
All right. Well, I feel like we have. I want to break at like at 1:50, so we can come back together as a group. So maybe we'll just do, Paige, could we just do like 5 minutes per breakout room?
Sure.
And that way we have a little bit of focus time with each of our guests.
One comment to everybody. I hope we didn't scare you. They're not that bad. I mean, there's a lot of lessons to be learned for sure, but a lot of people have already done this. So they're still worth applying for. Just know, for me anyway, it's helpful to have it in your mind when you're going into it. Makes it easier.